presentation of this program, KCAA, the Inland Talk Express.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali. I am Attorney Zulu Ali with the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir. This week, like we do every week, we'll be talking about critical and important issues in the criminal justice system and the justice system period that's actually affecting our communities. This week, we'll actually be talking about the issue of community leadership, activism, conflict, and its impact on the criminal justice system. And joining us today in this topic is going to be Najee Ali. Najee Ali is an award-winning, nationally celebrated civil rights activist, community organizer, and author. Najee's career began in 1988 as a volunteer for presidential candidate Reverend Jesse Jackson, which was the doorway for his involvement into the political and social activism realm. He has worked for nationally celebrated figures that include President Barack Obama, Reverend Al Sharpton, Martin Luther King III, Dick Gregory, John Hope Bryant, Congress member Karen Bass, Los Angeles County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and the late Michael Jackson. Najee is also the founder of the Los Angeles Muslim Heritage Month, which is officially recognized during the month of July every year by the city of Los Angeles. This resolution was presented in 2014 by Los Angeles City Council members Corinne Price and Bob Blumenthal and passed unanimously by the Los Angeles City Council. From leading the charge for police reform to negotiating gang truces, Najee Ali continues to evolve as a people's champion and confronts injustice wherever it may be. Thank you for joining us today, Najee.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation, and sorry for the long bio, but I wanted to make sure you knew exactly how much work I've done over the last 3 decades.
Yeah, I've definitely been following your career, brother. You've done a lot. I know you've been in the game for a minute, and I know that you've done a lot for the community, and I appreciate it. And you've been, on my list as somebody I wanted to be on the program from day one, and I appreciate getting the opportunity to speak with you.
The pleasure's all mine.
Yeah. And so I think I did get an opportunity to speak with you very briefly at the Vanguard Awards, I think back in October and November of last year.
Yeah.
And it was a pleasure meeting you there. And, since that time, actually, one of the reasons that there's been several topics, and obviously you have a wide range of knowledge and a wide range of experience in your activism and the things that you've done in the community. But one of the things that we've been talking about lately has been the issue of community leadership and activism and conflict and its impact on the criminal justice system. And kind of where we've been going with that with regards to the community leadership is that there's always this consistent criticism in the leadership that we've actually had in our communities, and the fact that what are certain leaders doing for the communities. There's always tends to be this never-ending conflict. I mean, both, I guess, internally as well as externally, as far as the community leadership is concerned. And one of the things that you hear quite often in the community is that people tell you, well, there is no leadership. I mean, we don't have any leaders, and I think that we do, but I think that oftentimes we allow some of our internal as well as external forces kind of damper, so to speak, I guess, for the lack of a better word, of some of the things that actually individuals have done in the community. And so, I mean, what is your take? I mean, not just, obviously you're in Los Angeles, but I know that you've done things beyond the city and the state. But what is your take on the state of leadership in our community?
Well, I think historically we've always had leadership in the black community, dating here in America since the days of slavery, whether it was Nat Turner, whether it was Uncle Tom. We've always had leaders, in this black community from the plantation leading up to post-slavery, whether it was Booker T. Washington or Carter G. Woodson, to W.E.B. Du Bois, to Mary McLeod Bethune, and I can fast track that to the 60s. From Malcolm X to Dr. Martin Luther King to Rosa Parks, we've always had some shape, form, or fashion of black leadership. Now, whether we have agreed with those leaders all the time on issues that impacted us, that's one thing. But we've always had some type of leadership in Black America and in the black community.
Right. Yeah, I know that we've had great leaders in the past. I think that sometimes something that you often hear, and just recently I did we had a conference recently about the jury reform initiative that we were doing, and there were some of the questions that were posed by some of the youth relating to the fact that is there just this big generational gap with our leadership? I mean, have we been successful, or have we been negligent in kind of passing on our leadership and grooming younger leaders to take our place?
Oh, well, without question. And as someone who was a young black activist when I got started, I was blessed to have been able to be mentored by Reverend Jesse Jackson and Reverend Al Sharpton, blessed to marry into the family of Imam W.D. Muhammad. So I've had a unique vantage point where I've actually been around national leaders who have a stellar track record of service to Black America. But unfortunately, I've always seen the other side of that, where some people may not have been as fortunate to have been groomed, been mentored to be around such figures. And as a result, I think black leadership has failed young Black America, not mentoring and grooming enough leaders in other cities and other areas of expertise.
Yeah. And one of the and actually last week I had actually a young man, really bright young man named Marcus Ross that had came on. He was actually, I invited him on after the conference because of some of the enlightening questions that he was asking about the ways in which we should begin to start, because he said that the generational gap oftentimes is based upon the fact that they don't know how to approach us, and maybe we don't know how to approach them. And he was asking me those questions, and I was trying to give him an answer as to what I can, what type of information and knowledge that I could extend to him and to his generation as to what is the best way to approach our generation. And I'm sure I'm a lot older than you are, Najee, but anyway, our generation, to make it easier, and so that they know how to approach us, and that we can impart our knowledge onto them, and that there won't be this. In his words was the fear of approaching us, and I don't know whether it's physical fear, but he did talk about the issue of his generation being judged. So, I mean, what is your take on that, and what would be your advice?
Well, I just think, living through certain time periods and just practical advice, I always give by what I've lived through. At the end of the day, I was a kid when Dr. King was marching, and the civil rights leaders of those days who fought for us in the segregation and made so much change. So for me, I was too young to be a part of that movement. So I always said I can only identify with the movement I've lived through, and that was the early 80s when I came of age as a young man. Our battles was different, trying to end gang violence in South Central LA between the Crips and the Bloods. So I think each generation has their own fight, their own battle in their communities wherever they live at, but we can't dismiss someone else's struggle and their sacrifice and contributions. And I just know when I was young, I made some mistakes. There's some things I regret and I shouldn't have. As far as older black leaders, I essentially call them Uncle Toms because they weren't in the hood or in the streets, fighting and making a difference. But I regret saying those things. And now that I'm older, I hear, similar things said about my generation of middle-aged black leaders from the younger generation, specifically those who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I just think we have to be respectful of what young people are doing, but also remember to let young people know that essentially young people do stand on the shoulders of those who came before you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is a very, can be a really complex relationship between the generations, because I was actually, when you talked about the Black Lives Matter, I remember seeing a piece where Reverend Jesse Jackson was in a community, and I believe that he was getting booed by people in the Black Lives Matter organization because of that disconnect between the generations of thinking that basically maybe our generation isn't doing enough, or we're not passing on the torch, or whatever the case may be. But people are very, very critical in our communities when it comes to our leaders. And that was another thing that we were talking about when it comes to our leaders, and sometimes even internal conflict within our communities tends to be a less talked about issue, but I think it's a very important issue, because oftentimes when you begin to start looking at individuals who are actually in the communities, who have committed themselves to making things better and made it their life's work to serve the communities, then their sacrifice comes into question, and you have all these conflicts within our own communities as to who's the right leader or who's the best leader, and it's actually distracting, and it's actually something that I personally feel is counterproductive. I don't know how to fix that. I mean, I don't know really what the answer is, but it is disturbing to me that we often have a lot of conflict within our community sometimes that I believe is counterproductive, and I believe that sometimes people capitalize on a lot of the conflict within our communities.
Well, I would have to agree with you 1,000%. In fact, I don't think it's limited to just Black America. I know when the movie Mandela came out, and I had a chance to see it 2 years ago, and one of the things that I found was shocking was Mandela, in his later years, was essentially talked about by his own young people in South Africa, who felt that he had kind of sold out becoming president of South Africa, where they wanted to essentially get back at the white farmers who had oppressed their people for decades, and they were more militant, not knowing that Mandela in his younger days was just as militant as they were. Wow. In fact, that's why he ended up being in prison for being militant.
Right. That's unbelievable that somebody would say that, and that is true. I remember that movie did come out, and that's amazing that somebody such as Mandela, who basically sacrificed so much for his people, would actually be criticized in that manner. And you're right, it does go beyond people within our communities. I think that a lot of people who are trying to do positive things oftentimes come under fire, within our communities. And it's a question that comes up all the time, and it also makes it a lot more difficult to focus on the things that we're trying to do when people spend so much time, the same people that you're trying to help and the same people that you've committed your life and put things on the line, oftentimes your entire life on the line, are the individuals sometimes that criticize you the most. And that's something that I don't know. Obviously, I guess it goes with the territory, but it's a very troubling issue, and I think it does have a significant impact on our ability to move forward. And when you're going in and you're talking about leaders within the communities that you want to connect with, you get the whispers and the sighs and all these other things about individuals, just simply because sometimes there's even jealousy and people want to have a monopoly on leadership. So that's a troubling issue for me.
Oh, well, without question, it goes back to your point you made earlier about how Reverend Jesse Jackson was essentially chastised and yelled and booed at by the younger generation of Black Lives Matter activists. And at the end of the day, we may not always agree with Reverend Jackson's methods, Reverend Sharps, and even myself, but we are leaders who have given so much to black causes in the black community. So at the end of the day, I think we have to at least respect leaders' sacrifices, and then the older leaders have to also respect the younger leaders' sacrifices and what they're trying to do.
Right. Yeah, I think that one of the things, I was asking, the young man the other day about the younger leaderships, and the gap in it. The activism and the community leadership that we have, and some of the ways in which we need to spend our time trying to, teach the younger generation to actually not just one leader, but groups of leaders. And how can we do that? How can we reach across the table and actually, cause individuals to become a lot more involved in leadership, not only just one person, but groups of people, teaching someone to take our place. And sometimes I feel like, on one hand, although we do have some great leaders and respect what they've done, we've got people that stay in place, and unfortunately they're not grooming people to take their place. And I see a significant void in it, because when you begin to start talking about leadership and known leaders such as yourself, when you go to a certain point, like I asked them, I said, what leaders do you know under the age of 35? And there's not a lot of them that are, we know them. Obviously, I'm not saying that there's not younger people who are active and who are concerned about their community, but we don't have, at least in my opinion, the type of leaders that we've been used to, that kind of, even though we know that there's different things among different time periods, as you said, every time has its own struggles. We don't see the type of leadership that we've seen in the past, at least from my perspective.
Well, that's part of the problem. And essentially, and I mentioned his name earlier, but Reverend Jesse Jackson, he's 75 now. Reverend Al Sharpton, he's in his late 60s, but they've been in the movement for at least the last 30, 40 years. Young activists who grew up marching with King, but unfortunately, we don't have enough leaders who have come after them to at least have their name known, that we can identify and point to as the next generation coming up.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things that
tell me your name.
This is Bilal. And one of the things that I look back at is history. And if we oftentimes look back to history, it tells a story for us today. And if you look back to the times of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, we always had people trying to place them against each other. You look back at Du Bois and Booker T and as well as Marcus Garvey, people place dissension between those two. Malcolm and Elijah. You go back to Huey P. Newton, as well as Maulana Karenga. There was dissension between that. And I think that history have a tendency to repeat itself, and we focus more on the dissension between one another of our method, or the method that one another choose, and that distracts us away from the overall goal. And I think that in today's society, when we look back at the leadership, we don't oftentimes see it. And if we do see it, it's like, you do the marches and you do the rallies, and at the end of the day, it repeats itself, and we keep doing this stuff over and over again. So I think my question to you is, we continue to see the police brutality, and we see the mass numbers of people that's coming out as marching, but we don't see those same amount of people that comes out and march when a Crip go over here and shoot a young girl on the street. Of course, I've seen you out on the street and doing your things. I think a few months ago I seen you out there, when one of the young sisters got killed out there in the street. But at the same time, we don't see the mass movements of individuals coming out protesting. Black Lives Matter, whatever. We don't see the numbers. We don't see the numbers when the gang shootings happen. We don't see the number of individuals. Is it fear? What is it?
And that's a great analysis. In fact, that's been one of my critiques of Black Lives Matter, is at the end of the day, we'll get out there and protest when a black person is killed and actually murdered by the police, which is nothing but state-sanctioned violence, which they always get away with. But when Pookie kills Ray Ray in the projects or in the inner cities across Black America, there's no outcry. So I've always said at the end of the day, all Black lives matter, and we have to be just as upset when we kill our own, and not just get upset when the police kill us.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's true. That's a lot. That's generally the narrative that you get oftentimes when we see the mass movements, when these things, when these events come out, and that we don't do much about the violence within our own communities. There is not the same, outcry, whether it's inner community violence as opposed to some sort of state sanctioned violence, and it should be the same type of responses.
Yeah, but I think that I think that it can change. The dynamics of all of this can change if individuals come together. Like I said, you got the dissension between whether it's the Black Lives Matter and Jesse Jackson or whoever else it is. Once them individuals see that we're out on the street together and we consolidating our force together, and this is the leadership coming to the aid of the individuals that's out in the street, I think youngsters would begin to respect that. They begin to see the leadership. But I think right now the youngsters is not seeing no form of leadership whatsoever. Where is the leadership? Najee Ali is one person. We see him oftentimes, but where is the leadership in the community when things happen? We see Black Lives Matter. We see a group of individuals here and there. But, I believe that individuals like see a figurehead. I remember one point in time, Farrakhan came out and he called the games true. I can't tell you how full that sports arena was, of individuals that came out. One person make this call and a lot of people came out and they responded to him. There was no violence that day. So I think that's what the younger generation is looking for. I understand what you're saying. We need to groom the youngsters, but sitting back looking from this perspective, I think that's what they look for. They look for just that one person to come forward and say, "Look, let's do this."
Right.
Yeah. Well, hi, I'm Rosa, and as the millennial in the room, I think I can agree with the fact that, a lot of times we do kind of look at our elite to kind of mirror what it is that they're doing, and at the same time, I feel like the system in itself has failed us as young people, because while we do have this big percentage of youth that are considered quote-unquote bystanders, as many research has come out that 38% of them are under 30 are considered bystanders, and nearly 73% of them are not really involved in politics. Yet we also have this other side of a lot of young people going out. We have the Orlando victims who actually went out and protested and were clowned at by major politicians, by the media. We have Wall Street protesters. We have this young woman, actually 2 days ago, Victoria Beret. She is one of the 21 plaintiffs in age 10 to 21 in the high-profile Juliana versus the United States lawsuit. And while she was up there, talking and giving her testimony, she was clowned by Scott Wagner, which is a very well-known politician, and was told that she is just youthful and naive and has a lack of experience. So I guess my question is, what is your advice to those youth who are actually out there making a difference and getting engaged and trying to change this system that we have? And also I feel like kind of like, what is your view on, instead of talking about youth as not being active in the community, not being politically involved in all of that, why don't we pay attention to those youth who are crying out, like Victoria, who are out there putting their lives, out there and speaking out on the issues that they're overcoming and the issues that are prominent in their communities? Why don't we highlight those stories? Why don't we actually pay attention to those stories?
Well, you're right, and that's a great analysis. I just know when I was a young activist, the old guard of black leadership in L.A., South Black L.A., they didn't care for me too much. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about Auntie Maxine Waters in the leaders who were in leadership then, and who were still in leadership 30 years later, because I was this young activist who hadn't paid his dues, as they say. I didn't march for King. I didn't get bit by police dogs, and I've always responded that my generation problems were much different. I was negotiating gang truces between the Crips and Bloods, trying to keep black people alive in my neighborhood. But I would tell young people, don't get discouraged. At the end of the day, Dr. King said anybody can be a leader just by serving. So now I think the model has to be micro movements, which I say in South LA, we can't look for Najee Ali for one black leader to do everything. We have to just organize in our communities, in our neighborhoods, block by block, and try to be of service and deal with the issues that are plaguing our communities. And it has to be fought by regular brothers and sisters who care that much to get involved in the neighborhoods.
One of the things I want to bring to your attention is that my big thing, and something that I'm, being a trial attorney and doing a lot of criminal defense work and doing some police misconduct cases as well, is that we here, all of us here, and both Rosa, the producer, as well as Bilal, who helps co-host and produce, as well as Dr. Akil Bashir, is that we've been engaged in this, and some other individuals, we've been engaged in this whole idea of jury reform. And the reason why I feel that as a criminal defense attorney about the jury reform is that, I'm originally from Tennessee. I was born and raised in Tennessee, and I was a police officer out there after I got out of the military. So when I moved to California, I just, I've got into the practicing out here, and one of the things that always amazed me, I remember the first time that I was out in Compton, and I saw a jury panel that came out on a case, and it was an all-white jury panel in a case in Compton, and it just blew me away that you had these jury panels even in places sometimes like in Inglewood and different places where you see, regardless of where you are, you're seeing these juries that are predominantly, not representing a cross-section of the community. And when you have jury pools that do not represent a cross-section of the community, you never know what the jury is like, which oftentimes forces many people in our community, and quite frankly, people, period, to oftentimes take plea negotiation, plea deals, because they don't really want to put their cases in the hand of a jury that they don't know really what the makeup is going to be like. And I've always felt that as a trial lawyer and trying cases, although we try to shy away from this whole race matter type of situation, the reality of it is having a cross section of a jury panel when you have individuals that are accused of criminal acts, as well as police officers who are accused of doing things unjustly in our communities, is critical. And we're not seeing the type of representation that we should be seeing in these jury pools. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a mass movement. Number one, is try to figure out how is it that we're having cases in Compton and South Central, Los Angeles and Inglewood and places like that, and having all juries completely from the valley. I mean, literally, or whether you're talking about police officers who are policing in our communities who may do something in our communities, but they'll never be prosecuted because of the fact that they're generally going to face the juries that do not reflect the same type of individuals that the community that they're policing. So my question to you is, and I know that you've been in the streets and on the ground. I mean, you've been in the game a long time. What is your take on that issue?
Well, I agree with you 1,000%. I mean, you'll get no argument from me on what you just raised. Everything you said is completely, in my opinion, truth. So I think we have to, as a people, as a community, encourage black and brown people to, serve on juries. When you get that jury summons in the mail, stop making up excuses that you're sick, that you can't attend jury duty for whatever reasons that you make up, at the end of the day, we have to, encourage people to serve on these juries. That way, defendants who are black and brown at least have a chance to be heard in court and be tried fairly.
All right. I appreciate that, and that's so critical. And I mean, it's something that I raise on a daily basis, because that's what you're seeing. I mean, nobody really wants to, and as well as jury commissions. I mean, there has to be. I mean, you're guaranteed the word jury of your peers is not necessarily in the Constitution. However, the Supreme Court has been clear that you're entitled to a jury of a cross section of the community, which clearly means individuals from different backgrounds, and that's something that we're not seeing, and it makes a world of difference. And I know that what we're trying to do, and as part of what you're doing, you've come out on many different issues, but I know one of them is police brutality. And I know across the country people are really upset because you're seeing, police officers who are being accused of committing criminal acts or shooting people or whatever the misconduct is, and sometimes, often, and many times they've been, they're on video. Mm-hmm. And you're still finding why these individuals, and they're surprised that they're being found not guilty. And nobody once brings up the issue of the fact that, look at the jury pool. And it's not about racism. It's because of we all have different realities, and it has a significant impact on how we see things that the police do. I mean, you have jurors that will think that clearly that police aren't even capable of doing things like that, and it might be genuine, but in our communities we understand that that's not our reality. We understand that police officers are human beings. We understand that police officers make mistakes, and we understand that police officers, some of them are good and some of them are bad, and some of them are criminals in uniform. And you have to, in order for you to have a fair trial, both with police officers who are being accused, and nobody is bringing that up. And I think that's a huge issue, and people are really upset when they see the results of some of these verdicts or acquittals against some of these police officers, but nobody really looks at the makeup of these jury panels. And I would love, and I've done, we've written a lot of correspondence, and I mean, we're actually just launching this campaign, but I'm hoping that we can make some sort of headway in trying to, number one, there has to be some sort of challenge as to the manner in which these jury commissioners are choosing these jury panels. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, you're talking about I've been where there's an entire panel of nobody that looks like my client. Mm-hmm. And that's just crazy.
Well, what you're raising is actually a major issue, and I do interviews all the time, and you're the first person who's actually, talked to me about this issue and wanted to raise this campaign, because, full disclosure, in 2008, I was arrested for bribery as related to my daughter having a traffic accident. Now, I was totally innocent, and the people lied on me, but where I got arrested and had to face the charges was Alhambra, which is a suburb in L.A. Mm-hmm. There's mostly Asian and white people.
Right.
So just based on where I would be facing my trial, if I took the trial and I had a paid lawyer, I'd end up taking a plea deal, because I was scared to death that even though I was innocent of these charges, that if I was found guilty by this, essentially what would have been an all-white and Asian jury, that they would end up sending me to prison for years for something I didn't do. I took the plea deal.
Right.
And then when you fast forward historically, and history bears me out, is that the Rodney King beating, the 4 white cops who beat Rodney King, and we all saw the video across the world 25 years ago, they were found not guilty by an all-white jury, and essentially what you're saying is correct. Right. They were found found not guilty by an all-white jury, yet we all saw the videotape of Rodney King being beat to death by these 4 white officers.
Right, right. It's right there, and that's crazy, and that's the reality. That's why that's why innocent people take deals, because they do not want to take that chance of going in front of a jury and not knowing. I mean, I had a case with a guy that you know, he was adamant, I was adamant. There's no question that this guy was innocent in my mind. And, you know, we're standing there, we're getting ready to start trial, and a panel walks in. And he leans over to me and he says in a quiet voice, "Is that deal still on the table?" Because he just, you know, he's sitting here in Inglewood, he just saw that there was nobody that looked like him. And, you know, he wasn't willing to take that chance of getting, you know, like you said, going to prison when he can actually walk away from it at that moment. And that's how prosecutors play that game. They understand that juries aren't fair and impartial. And it might not necessarily be intentionally. It's just like I said, their reality and our reality is often different. And you know, when you go into, and I'm sure you've seen these trials and these voir dires, the DA asked the question to the jury panel: how many of you have had negative police experience? Everybody, all the people of color raised their hand. And then what happens is that basically when he's striking, you know, brown and black jurors and you challenge it, then, you know, he can give the race neutral reason of why he struck the juror by the fact that they've had negative experience with the police. And it's kind of like a loaded question, you know. And you know, we really want to begin to start trying to do something about that, and trying to launch this campaign and you know, curious about how, you know, even as an attorney, even the judges that I spoke with can't really answer the question specifically as to how these jury panels are actually chosen. I don't know if they're doing them randomly. You know, a lot of attorneys can't even answer that question, but I believe that that's something that we really need to deal with, and if we're ever really going to see a difference in the criminal justice system, we're going to have to figure out a way where we can become more involved in that process.
Oh yes, I mean I agree with you 1,000%. And at the end of the day, you know, as I mentioned previously, I think it's important that, you know, we, you know, give talks to college age young people to get them more involved in the criminal justice system in all facets, because at the end of the day, they're essentially locking us up and throwing away the key and getting away with it legally.
Right. Absolutely, and that's critical.
And I think it makes it easier for the police to pull that trigger if he knows that you know, when he pulls that trigger on the other end of that deal, once he goes before a jury, he got a jury of his own peers. Then it's gonna make it quite easy for him to pull that trigger without a second thought. You know, I think one of the other things is, you know, you looking at, you know, where these individuals is pulled from, like Mr. Ali was just talking about. If I got someone who born and raised in Orange County, Upper Anaheim, you know, and I'm bringing them down to the hood to try to see and try to figure out, you know, whether Ray Ray is guilty or not, they can't glance into what Ray Ray endure every day in the hood. Exactly. You look at the police officer. Some of the police officers that might, you know, police Compton, you know, where they live at. You know, if they never lived in Compton, they never lived in the inner city, but they come down to police to inner city, they don't understand the reality, so that's why they respond so quick. You know, they respond, and you know, a lot of them, and you know, and I often said this, a lot of them, you know, they go back and they look at some of the movies that they didn't seen across, you know, the TV, like Boys in the Hood or Menace to Society, and they think that's the reality. And that's how they respond to it, because that's the only way that they can grasp of what someone is going through, because they never lived there. You know? Right.
Yeah, I agree. And if you connect the dots, lately, and we've seen this great phenomenon over the last several weeks and months of white people calling the police on black people.
Right.
From everything from sitting in Starbucks, to selling lemonade, to cooking outdoors, to simply, you know, walking in their own neighborhoods. So the connection is those white people calling the police on black people have no interaction with black people. They essentially are afraid of black people just as the police are.
Yeah.
But instead of shooting us, the police can shoot us legally, but white people will call the police on us to be shot.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes, I mean, I think that, and that's kind of interesting too, because a lot of times I think that they feel like, there's some degree of pleasure. And I think that they beginning, I mean, it's always been an issue. I think that we can go back even before the climate that we're in right now. But I think that, I think sometimes they get a degree of pleasure in because, you know what I mean, in just doing it is more, is not just always fear, but just a degree of pleasure in being able to do it and seeing how you do the response, because they don't want you there.
Right, but remember when we were kids on the playground, we were all kids, and those of us who had older siblings, essentially what I would do, like, okay, I would just call my big brother to come help me on the playground, and that's what the white people are doing. They're using the police they're calling them as their big brother to get back at black people.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to what you were saying, I think a few days ago when we was talking about it, is that, a lot of these police, they like a gang, man. They got to get their stripes. It's back, old days back in the hood, if we went out and did something, okay, if we committed a murder, you got that teardrop on your eye to know that this is, this the big dog here. He got this tucked up under his belt. And I think it's the same thing that goes along with them. What you got, you got that, you got that body under you,
Right.
So it's to me, I think is, they always say the blue.
Right. Yeah.
That's in fact, if you Google L.A. County Sheriff's deputies, there's a major investigation that was launched last week into the L.A. County deputies, who are essentially the biggest gang in L.A., where they are getting tattoos to symbolize their brotherhood, and it's a rite of passage and initiation with the L.A. County Deputy Sheriff. So now there's a big investigation because essentially they are engaging in gang-like culture and behavior.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the same type of ideology. I mean, just it's almost like the necessity of being accepted in that culture, the police culture. I mean, and being the paramilitary culture is, it's unbelievable, because I mean, what you're doing is not like working at IBM, where if you got a problem with an employee or you're a whistleblower, I mean, what are the consequences? I always, think about the Serpico, where, if you begin to start telling on other officers and you are ostracized within the department, I mean, your life is on the line. And it's extremely, your success in the police department is based significantly on your ability to get along with your peers. It's a paramilitary organization. The way that you train. When I went to the police academy, I got out of Marine Corps in July. I was in a police academy in October, and it was so similar. And the camaraderie and the way that you related to each other.
I think we might have a call.
Is the same. Yeah, we have a caller. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Charlton Noble. I'm calling in. I try to catch your show every week. But, I was listening to you guys talking about activists in the neighborhood. And as far as the sheriffs acting like gang members, that's been 20 years ago. The sheriffs was throwing up signs. I'm a product of the street. I'm not glorifying street life. I'm a product, and I've seen it. I've seen how Chief Gates was doing. I'm very familiar with Nazi Ali. But it's a lot more people out there that was doing things, trying to do things. I'm not going to really throw dirt on Messy Jesse, but I had some dealings with him too. And people, as far as them booing Jesse, they found him out. Everybody know what's up with Jesse. Jesse would show up at corporations and leave with a check, and then he would shut his mouth. See, we don't need leaders like that. Right now, these youngsters, they looking for serious people that's talking truth. I said that last week. I'm going to say it till the cows come home. They looking at, you can't follow from behind. Lead from behind. People will say one thing and then that's it. These youngsters, man, they don't have activities. we should be trying to lead them in more positive ways, opening up community centers for them. We should be pushing these athletes. I mean, really pushing them. They're making more money than law a lot. They can donate money to open up centers. You don't have to charge every kid that's trying to get off the street money. But, I know I'm just one person. It's a lot we can do. We don't do nothing. And when we say Black Lives Matter, they say, why you always say Black Lives Matter and you don't say all lives matter? When have you ever known a cop to go to Beverly Hills and kill an 11-year-old with a toy gun and it's justifiable homicide? You understand? So that's where I'm at out here.
Yeah.
The number one thing is white supremacy. Hey, you might say I'm wrong. Why do you think no one's going to be on a jury for 3 weeks and they only getting $30 a day? That's not $20. That's not going to pay their bills.
That's right.
Maybe we can have an organization, start an organization that can donate for jurors, donate money for them, so they won't be in no hardship. You can't expect a person to lose their house. I'm telling you, I got my butt whooped by cops. And I'm going to tell you, I ain't going to even lie to you. The 3 or 4 times I got my butt whooped by cops, I wasn't absolutely innocent. But I ain't trying to say that's what they should have done. But we got to lead. We got to really lead, man. It's so sad. I get emotional when I talk about the youth because don't nobody care.
Right.
No, I mean, I'm serious. It's very few people care. They say they care. Look at the action. Do you know the cheapest thing you can do is open your mouth and say something? You it's action.
Right.
Action. These youngsters, they saying these youngsters are scared to approach you. No, they ain't. The teachers are scared of the principal. The principals are scared of the superintendent. The superintendents are scared of the school board, and the kids ain't scared of nobody. They doing what they want to do because they don't have good leadership. And it's not just, we can't just point at the parents because you're going to raise them under a bridge? We got to start really getting back to that togetherness. Each one teach one. We letting the rappers push this line that lean is cool. And these little youngsters is broken, I don't know what, haven't even really started their life. And they drinking lean. That's an opiate. I'm telling you, man, it's a lot more that we can, yes, the jury, that's good. It is. But these youngsters, we got to get them before they get there. We got to get people out here that's really in their ear. I know it ain't going to take, they say it take a village to raise a child. We don't believe in that no more. We don't believe in that. We don't believe. I mean, if I'm wrong, somebody prove me wrong.
Yeah.
I look at all these sites. They got. I mean, all these construction sites. You don't think that black politician, Maxine Waters? I'm gonna tell you, I love Maxine Waters because she done something that a lot of people won't do. They own her right now for pushing her line. She just got a lot of heart. She say what people want to say. Nobody can say nothing bad about Maxine Waters as far as Charlton Noble Sr. is concerned. Because Maxine is a legend in my eyes. And she helps people. But she's only one person.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know I'm just taking up y'all time, but I'm listening to you. A lot of it is positive, but when you're asking about the youth, it ain't rocket science and stuff. Look, they have nowhere to go.
Look.
Just remember when we had places to go.
Yeah. Real quick, let me say this real quick because, I'm executive director of a youth mentoring group, and I'm gonna tell you, without leaders like Mr. Ali and a couple of other few people that actually has contributed to my nonprofit, it wouldn't be alive today. And I'm gonna tell you a sad reality because our youth is our future, and if we can't light a fire up under our youth, we doomed. We need to light this fire up under our youth and lead our youth because I'm going to tell you what's sad. I went down to Compton City Hall a couple of weeks ago, and all black people was in Compton City Hall, and I can't tell you how many times they passed the buck. You know, they got all these properties sitting over in Compton that's been laying dormant for I don't know how many years, and I'm sitting down there just asking for help just for the youth. And I mean, they passed me around like I was a piece of steak or something like that.
Oh, man.
You know, and then you look at I put up GoFundMe pages and stuff like that. When I can see them giving $15,000 for a dog surgery and only get $15 for a youth organization, it's a damn shame, and it says something about our country.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, I agree with you. You ain't, hey, man, you preach to the choir. I see it every day. No, because they don't care. They don't care. They don't care. So a dog can get $15,000. They do it all the time. A cat, a dog, you know. I mean, people just flood money. They flood it so much that they have money left over. But when you talk about books, have a place for the kids to go. See, they don't really wake up until that youth say, put that pistol in their face and say, give me everything you got. Then they say, oh man, these kids, they wild. Even, I don't want to say nothing. I just got to speak truth.
Yeah.
I got to speak truth.
Yeah.
Even black people say, oh, they be saying, the black youth, oh, they so wild. I asked this lady the other day, what are you, purple? You know, come on, how you going to, if you're going to tell me that, I know what you're saying to them.
Right.
And I ain't trying to be, I can't be, everybody probably got a little racism, but, excuse me, a little prejudice.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I can't hurt you.
Yeah.
But I know what's going on. I'm not blind to anything. Anyway, I appreciate you guys accepting my call.
And thank you for calling, man.
I don't mind. I will get. I could get on the front line.
Okay.
I'm serious.
I know that's
my
right.
name is Charlton Noble. I'm not scared to put my name out here. I get on the line.
Yeah.
I get on the front line and ride.
I know that's right.
We gotta. You know, like the youngsters, they just don't have nobody no faith in some of the leaders. I know Najee Ali is from a long time. You know, I remember him out there, especially when the riots. You know, but anyway, thank you guys.
All right. Well, thank you for calling, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah. Najee.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Caller made some great points, and I recall you mentioning Brother Akil Bashir is someone that you work with. You guys have worked with before.
Right. Yeah.
He's a South Central LA icon. So please give him my regards when you talk to him again.
Oh, most definitely. He speaks highly of you. He actually is one of the commentators here on the show. He wasn't able to make it. He's actually had to be out of state today, so he wasn't able to make it. But he definitely speaks highly of you, and was looking forward to being here today, but he wasn't able to make it back. So yeah, most definitely. I'll
catch him next time. The feeling's mutual.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, yeah, man. Like I said, I appreciate you calling in, man, and it's an honor and a pleasure to have had you on the show today, man. I really appreciate your work. I've followed you, and I've known about you, ever since I've been in California, man. And it's nothing more than a pleasure to have you on the show, and I highly respect you, and I'd love to have you back again and have another opportunity to dialogue with you, and hopefully one day do some work with you as well, man. So I appreciate you taking the time to blessing us with your presence, man.
Oh, no, definitely. I do my homework, so I've heard nothing but great things about all of you and this show, believe me. So I appreciate being allowed to have a platform that talk about things in our community, and I look forward to being a guest again at some point. So please bring me back on when you guys have time for me, and keep up the great work that you're doing.
Okay. Thanks a lot, bro. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, man. Najee Ali. I think we've had a good show today. I mean, we've had some really interesting topics that we've been going over. I think that we're coming up, and what we always do, we always like to talk about things that's going to give us some solutions about how to move forward.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes you can get more out of just creating a dialogue of a lot of controversy and a lot of emotion without really walking away with some sort of, solution to problems. But, we try to focus on an opportunity to dialogue and actually give some sort of solution without just talking about the problem. I know talking about the problem can be really, really, really entertaining, know.
Yeah.
But the solution is really not quite as appealing, so to speak, but it's necessary.
Exactly.
We got ways to go. We can have only so many reality shows, right?
True.
Yeah. So again, I appreciate you for joining us for this edition of Justice Watch with Attorney Zulu Ali, and on behalf of the Justice Watch crew, Rosa Nunez, Michael Bilal Clark, and Dr. Akil Bashir, I appreciate you listening in. Until next week, we'll see you the same time, same place, same channel. Until next week, stay blessed.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, K292 FQ Riverside, and K293 CF Moreno Valley.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
Brooks Koepka